Okay, so um, today, or second video I'm doing for today, because I need to do a makeup, but I want to talk about something that's been happening recently. The last couple of days I've been doing this. I've been doing this training. It's kind of a makeup thing for a training that I didn't get to attend in December of last year, and so it had I chose to do this training alternative that I have to complete to satisfy my requirements for my work with the BET program. And so I decided to do this online program through what's called Canvas or Instructure. It could be called the Randolph Shepherd training for business consultants, which I'm not a business consultant. I'm a licensed vendor through the program. But this was an option, and I've done it, and I've really enjoyed it. I've actually learned a lot in the program. I think I walked away with more brains than I went into it with. Um, some of it gets a little bit more, kind of in the sludge, but fortunately, I have pretty good comprehension, so I can read something. And in almost every case so far, 10 out of the 13 exams I've taken, um, I have scored 80% or more. So, and that's what you're required to do to pass each module, is pass 80% on the quizzes. On one of them, I got five, but it's because I'd barely studied any of the material. And then on the other two, I got 70. So I was one question shy, but still 70, 70, and you have to cross with an 80. So I got to go back and do three modules. But I've got 16 total I have to do, and I've already completed 10, so I'm more than halfway through it. What is it? 16 divided by, no, 10 divided by 16 is 100. 5 is 80. Yes, so 9. Oh, 16. No. It'd be 6. 6. Yeah, so 6. So I'm about 60. What is that? 60. And then 16. 60 goes 2. So I'm about 62% of the way through it. Yeah. About 62.5% of the way through the whole thing. My math is not failing me today. So I'm actually pretty far along in it, which is great, but I'm going to be focusing on finishing that up today. I've got my report in. I got that done today, which is good because I needed to get that done. I got to get back to packing. I haven't done any packing the last couple of days, so, because I've been focusing on this. But that's not why I'm here today. So what I wanted to talk about was, it's a weird thing, but I want to talk about destroying a franchise when it comes to television. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples. These are ones that are important to me because I followed them from when I was young and even into today. Okay, so I watched TV shows like Quantum Leap, The Dukes of Hazzard, Full House, Star Trek: The Next Generation, MacGyver. Let's see what else. I like the A Team, but it wasn't as much as the A Team. Knight Rider, we watched Knight Rider a lot. So that being said, my family and I, and me specifically, excuse me, I apologize. It is kind of 4 in the morning. So, but I used to watch all these shows, okay, and most of them ended in the early '90s, okay, and that was a prime age of television. Now that wasn't the golden age of television or movies, but it was definitely one of the latter part of the golden age of television. Okay, because we still see shows like repeats for shows like Full House, repeats for shows like and I watched Frasier as well, but Frasier is a whole other thing. I really haven't done anything with Frasier, but um, but I but these shows were the Cosby Show, by the way, too. Cosby Show's a huge one for me as a kid, but they haven't really done anything with the Cosby Show either. So I mean, the shows I mentioned earlier. Let me make sure I make a point of talking about. These are the ones I'm addressing that they have really kind of destroyed franchises on, because they didn't really mess with the Cosby Show afterwards. Of course, they've persecuted Bill Cosby, um, and I don't think Kelsey Grammer and the rest of the cast of Frasier wanted to come back for, kind of a reboot of it all. And of course now, John Mahoney is gone, the one who played the dad on the show. So it just wouldn't be quite the same series, and they're all significantly older and doing other projects. So they don't need to go back to Frasier, and they've got other things doing. I know David Hyde Pierce is hugely involved in the theater in New York. I don't know what the status of that is currently because of all the kind of shutdowns that occurred back then. But Kelsey Grammer has stayed active in doing television in his own right. Jane Leeves went on and did Hot in Cleveland for a number of years. Perry Gilpin did a number of other shows. So they didn't need to really reboot it that way. And I was also into Friends, but they really haven't rebooted Friends. But there was one other show I was going to mention that I really loved that also kind of got destroyed the franchising of. So that was a TV show, and it was a little later, but it was a show called Entourage. Now that one came along in the late 90s, early 2000s. Computer, when did the TV series Entourage debut? Computer, when did the TV series Entourage debut?
Entourage, the TV show, premiered on July 18, 2004.
Okay, so that was actually the same year as my last video. I was talking about my relationship, so that's really interesting. But that was one of the latter ones. So that was one of the rarities in television to me that kind of still, it was an HBO show, by the way. So, that was one of the rare ones for me. But we'll just kind of go back and talk about all of them. So the ones that I just sort of mentioned are significant. So Dukes of Hazzard, Full House, Quantum Leap, Star Trek Next Generation. And then we'll talk a little bit about Entourage. Let me start with Entourage because it's the later one. So the problem that I have with Entourage is Entourage had 8 seasons. And if you ever saw the series Entourage, then that's fantastic. It was good. I think they ran as long as they needed to run. It showed the growth of all of the 4 major cast members, and really Ari as well, who would be the 5th, and how they evolved as human beings and all that stuff like that. And that was great. And they ended it on the right note, where kind of Ari went his own way, where at the end, Eric finally found a relationship he was willing to be committed to. Turtle had kind of started his own business and gone off. Johnny became successful on another TV show and was starting to, get back out there again. And then, and the character of Vince had finally kind of found a relationship, even though it was kind of, last minute, he kind of found this relationship that just worked for him. And in the end, they're all supposed to go somewhere together, including Sloane, who's Eric's Sloane, the girl that Eric was in love with and was going to have a baby with, even though they were having problems in their relationship. She kind of is there at the airport, and they are supposed to be going. Vince and Johnny and Turtle are all supposed to be going. I can't remember where they're going, but they're going somewhere together. And at the end, Sloane is gonna, be going somewhere else. And I think Eric decides at the end to go with her. But their friendships are all sort of reunited because they had some stress at earlier parts of the season with Vince and Eric and all that stuff like that. But they were all there they were there together at the end. And as this TV show ends, Eric has finally gotten reconnected with Sloane, and they're going to get on the plane and leave together. And Johnny and Turtle and Vince are along with Vince's new, I think she was his wife at that point. I could be wrong, but they're all going to get on the plane. It's been a number of years since I've seen this, by the way. But they're all going to get together. What I really remember about the end of the show, which is kind of cutting to the chase a little slower than I should have, is that at the end, they both get on these planes, and the planes runway, drive down the runway together and they take off and they're in the sky next to each other, and then they kind of diverge and one goes right and one goes left. And the whole idea was they were together, but they had to follow their own paths. And they may not have the same relationship they used to have, but that they were, going to go their own ways now. But still, they would always be family and be connected. And I thought that was a great way to end it. It was a great symbolism of them both flying off into the sunset, and a great closure to a show. Well, then of course they had to make a movie for Entourage, and of course they brought them all back, and everything that they had kind of finally put together at the end of the series, they tore apart so they could do a movie, another follow up, just for a little bit more money. And to me, that destroys a franchise. So let's move to the earlier things I was talking about, the ones where they did the same thing with the Dukes of Hazzard. Of course, they took that show, which was supposed to be kind of an action adventure show, down home, comfortable thing, back in the 70s, early 80s, and then they started putting Willie Nelson and Smoking Pot and Jessica Simpson and Johnny Knoxville and Sean Wayne Scott. And these are comedic people who do silly kind of bullshit. And they kind of killed the spirit that made the Dukes of Hazzard what it was. When that series ended, they didn't really get a goodbye episode. They brought him back for a Return to Hazard County film. But even those Return to Hazard County movies that they did, I wish they had just left them alone. The series was fine the way it left off. Maybe it didn't get a quote unquote goodbye episode, but it just showed that they were all still sort of there and connected in Hazard. And they were always going, even though they had fights between them, with Boss Hogg and Roscoe and all that, that they were always going to be connected. They were part of the same community of family. And it just left them there in that place. I thought that was the best way to do it. And I was really disappointed that they even, brought it back for the Hazard movies, reunion movies, or that they brought them back for these bigger movies that they did with, the other actors I mentioned before, and Willie Nelson. I felt like it was destroying a franchise. The franchise was fine the way it was. The problem was it was very successful. And Hollywood cannot come up with anything creative anymore. Now, mind you, we've always told the same stories over and over again, but it's the way you tell the story that makes it different. But they've gotten lazy about how to retell a story in a different way. So they just borrow characters that have a brand value to them, and then they want to abuse them so they can do something to them, even though they'll call them out as racist and all that stuff nowadays. They want to destroy these franchises, but they also want the money that they make off of them. So it's really absurd to me that they did that with Dukes of Hazzard. Then you have Quantum Leap, which I loved Quantum Leap as a kid. Quantum Leap only ran for 4 years. There was a reason it ran for 4 years, which was that it ran for 4 years because they kept switching the time slots for it. So Quantum Leap started off very successfully. It was having trouble staying on, but they didn't have a stable time. So when they finally got a stable time, I think it was Wednesdays was their original night and time, and they were doing good and started building an audience, and then they wanted to move them to another night. And then they wanted to move them into another night. So it was like every season they kept getting a different time zone, time slot, and it was hard for fans to keep up with them, to the point where their fans couldn't follow them because it was constantly changing every season, and finally they didn't have enough ratings to survive. They were going to originally give them a 5th season, but then they canceled it after the end of season 4, even though there was a plan for them to go into season 5. And so in the end of season 4, if you've ever seen the final episode of Quantum Leap, as it originally aired, the end of it is Sam leaps out and leaps into the home where Al's ex-wife, Beth, is at. And she's his ex-wife because Beth believes Al has died in Vietnam, and she ends up ultimately, after a number of years, giving up on his return and gets involved in a new relationship and gets married. And by the time Al gets back, she's moved on with her life and she's left him behind. So Sam goes back in the last episode. He goes back to put one right for Al and tell Beth that Al is still alive and that he's coming home. Now, what they don't show you in the series is that it was a number of years later that he came home, but he tells her Al's alive and he's coming home. And so that changed the course of history within the storyline, and Beth never remarried. And ultimately, she and Al, what is that smell? Babies? Simba? Dave? Simba? Dave? Simba? Dave? Come here. You guys okay? Simba? Simba? That's my boy. Just want to make sure you're okay. What's that smell? You smell that? So weird smell. You okay? Bear, you okay? You okay? Bear, you okay? That smells weird. I love you. Feel your breath. You don't smell bad. Come here, Bear. Come here, Bear. Hey, I love you. Come here, Bear. Okay, well, Bear's just playing with his toy. I just want to make sure you're okay. Come here, babe. I'm so scared when I think about you guys not feeling well. God, I love you so much. So he changes history, and then when he leaps out, after it kind of moves over to a picture of Al on the coffee table, and then it does the blue kind of highlight where Sam leaps out, and it says that Beth never remarried, and she and Al had stayed together and had 4 children, and then it says that Sam Beckett never returned home. Well, if you don't know by now, watching all this stuff, the original ending was actually not supposed to be how that ended. It was supposed to have that stuff in it, but in the end, the original season finale was supposed to be that you then see Sam leaping, and Beth and Beth and Al are talking, and they still haven't found Sam. And you ultimately figure out what happened with him is that he leaped out of his own lifetime. So now he had done this once in the series. He had actually leaped into the Civil War times. But this was supposed to be that he leaped out of his own lifetime, meaning he went to the future. So, and I don't remember what they said was supposed to have happened and where he was supposed to land in the future. But I don't think they ever showed him. I think they just left it you knowing that he had leaped to the future, and they had no idea of how to find him now. So I think that's what the original concept was. But so what happens is that the show ends, and of course, for years and years, people wanted a Quantum Leap return, a movie or whatever else. And then, I guess it was back a little over a year ago, a couple of years ago, they announced they were going to bring back Quantum Leap. But of course, this is after us having known that we had lost Dean Stockwell, who played Al, who was obviously one of this buddy team in this TV series. So they decided to they I think they wanted Sam, but that they wanted Scott Bakula to return, but then they didn't want to make him the main character anymore. They wanted to bring on this new generation of people. But what they basically wanted to do was they wanted to rob the brand value of Quantum Leap and of character of Sam and use it to perpetuate these new people. Instead of just coming up with their own thing, they wanted to try and, basically, steal what was great about the original Quantum Leap. And what's really sad is Don Balthazar, the guy who actually created the original Quantum Leap, went along with this. So he's as guilty as any of them are, because he really damaged what made the original Quantum Leap good. This Quantum Leap doesn't make any sense. It's too convoluted. It just gets too convoluted, and it's silly. And there's too many woke factors in it. Woke makes you go broke. It really truly does, because these series don't last long when they go woke too much. They did that with them, and I'll jump to the other one, which is that they did this with, which is Star Trek Next Generation with the new Picard. So I have watched 1.5. I committed to a 7-day free trial of Paramount Plus on Amazon. And I've watched, like, a watched sort of a little bit here and there, listening to stuff more than watching it physically, and binged a bunch of these episodes. And I'm on, like, I think I'm on the beginning of season 2, episode 6. I think I'm literally 1.5 seasons in. and they have three. The third one's going to be released on February 16th, and then the show will be over. They've announced that will be the last part of the show. It won't have a fourth season, which is good. So, what irritates me about this one is the only thing that brings people to this show are, well, there's two things that bring people to this show: Star Trek and Picard. Okay, those are the only two things that bring people to the show, and they have to have Patrick Stewart in there because if they don't, well, obviously it can't be called Picard. But but Patrick Stewart, he is a fine actor, one of the best. But he sounds very tired in his performance, and I doesn't mean he's not good at his performance, but he sounds very tired, meaning like that he's an older gentleman. Patrick Stewart is like 80 something years old. Computer, how old is Patrick Stewart? Computer, how old is Patrick Stewart? I think he's 82.
Patrick Stewart is 82 years old.
Yeah, he's 82 years old. So he started shooting this at 80 years old. That's like trying to bring William Shatner back to play Kirk at this point. It's just because Shatner's 90 years old. He's 90 or 93. Computer, how old is William Shatner? Computer, how old is William Shatner?
William Shatner is 91 years
He's 91 years old. So he's, a decade older than Patrick Stewart. But my point is that they're breeding off of what made those films successful, and that series successful was that whole cast. They had an incredibly good cast in the original TNG, and they are trying to feed off of the one main guy, Patrick Stewart. And of course, they have to bring back Spiner because he was the second most popular character on the show. And then they brought back Frakes, and they brought back what's his name? Frakes, and they brought back Marina Sirtis. And they're both fantastic actors and very capable actors and all that. And all of the cast is great. That's great when it comes to the original TNG cast. And I think it has a lot to do with the effort that was put into casting back then. Now there's not as much focus on good performances as there is on diversity. And it's just like anything. You can diversify yourself to death. Just for the sake of being diverse doesn't mean that you're getting the best actors. I mean, some of them are okay. Some of them are a little irritating, as they don't leave that good taste in your mouth when you're watching them. They become a little bit annoying to listen to and watch. But one of the things they've really done with this, which in the first season, it's all about how they're kind of following the same pattern. So it's amazing that they keep talking in both the last season and in this second season. The whole focus is on how humanity is human beings are just thoughtless and angry and hateful people. Yet they want you to believe that they created this great society ultimately. And they say, oh, they created this great society in the future. We created this great society in the future. But they can't help but talk about how bad humanity was in our current times. And how it changed, that suddenly everybody became loving and beautiful, and it's bullshit, because there's nothing to lead you to believe. What they want you to believe happened was that people became socialist, and that socialism led you to it. But how many socialist countries are happy? How many socialist countries don't have dictators telling them how to live their lives? This doesn't even present as though there's a person in charge, that the world just exists in harmony. That's a big bunch of bullshit. Countries have to have fundamental beliefs, and they have philosophies of how to do things, and they have to have a set of morals and ethics, and a set of, this is our laws and this is how we've structured our society. There has to be all that stuff for it to work. And not every country, based on religious beliefs or how the country should be run, it's never going to be united in that way. It's a great concept. It's a great theory, but it's not practical. And the first season, and even in the second season, they're focusing on, well, humanity made the mistake that one time in first season one, the Romulans needed help, and and they decided to help the Romulans, and in the process they turned their backs on the synthetics, and now the synthetics were, being, ostracized, and they weren't allowed to exist because the Federation decided that they were no longer going to let the synths continue to exist and outlawed them and all that stuff like that. And then of course, Picard has to come save the day because he's the only man who can talk them out of it. Under millions and trillions of people that exist within the universe, he's the one guy who can talk them out of it, even though his dialogue is pretty fucking motivational speaker type. I mean, why do you just have Anthony Robbins come over and talk to these people? Did anybody think about talking to Anthony Robbins, descendants? I mean, maybe Anthony Robbins' descendants could have solved this problem too. Why did you need to go get Picard? I mean, it's as though there's nothing about, he was great for a leadership and a level-headed person, but to literally change the course of all history, to believe that one character is the only one who could have done it, is kind of bullshit, and it's very pretentious in that way. And it's really also really interesting because they talk about in season 2, the one that's really gotten me kind of irritated with it is that they're talking about, they have to go back to the year 2024, so basically a year from now, essentially, right? And they go back to 2024, and at one point, one of the characters who happens to be of Latino descent, he gets arrested by ICE, and they're like, ICE, they're a bunch of assholes, they're a bunch of assholes. They're just taking these people and throwing them and not giving them a safe sanctuary and stuff like that. And they're evil and all they're bad guys. And of course they play all the ICE characters as being bad guys and just big attitude problem peoples who are just sarcastic and and condescending to everybody who's Latino. That is not what the people who were in ICE do. They play them as these cartoon characters. There's no substance to them. They just paint them good guy with a white hat, bad guy with a black hat, or maybe you can't even do white hats anymore. Maybe it's, I don't know what the hell the color hat. Maybe it's a pussy hat for now, for all I know now. But the point is that there has to be a good guy, bad guy, and of course, the ICE is the bad guys for getting people who broke the law out of the country. They're arresting people and throwing them out of the country because they illegally entered the country and they refuse to show up for their court dates. It's not like ICE just goes around looking for random Latinos to kick out of the country. They're assigned to go find people who did not show up for their court dates and who no longer have, or they violated the terms of their visa, and they're no longer allowed to be in the United States. But of course, they're portrayed as the bad guys here. Now, mind you, this is also a series where they keep talking about how the Federation should not interfere, and that no other species should interfere with another species' lifestyle in their planet. So when Cardassians wanted to go to that planet and take up the whole planet, when Romulans wanted to take over another planet, when all of the Klingons wanted to conquer another world, when all that stuff was going on, they said you cannot do this. You cannot go and interfere with another world's lifestyle and the way they live. Well, that's exactly the same thing that people who are coming across the border are doing. They're violating with a standard of a societal standard. This is how we do things. We follow a policy to join, to become a part of this world. There's rules for it. You're legal. Don't break into people's cars. Don't steal their shit. Don't break into their homes. Don't murder their children. Don't rape and murder their women. Whatever the hell it is. Don't manipulate people. Don't do excessive drugs. Don't try and sell drugs to people. Don't try and kill people for your own entertainment, your own pleasure, just so you can get what you want. There's a standard that our society is supposed to have within the United States. And they are acting as though these people who are coming from other countries aren't trying to break our societal standards when they are. So they are basically doing what the Borg are doing. They're, coming into our world and changing our world, expecting us to take care of them and to give us all the Borg go and steal resources from other worlds. That's the same thing that illegal aliens are doing coming into this country. They're stealing our resources that should be going to the people in this world to take care of the people in this country. But they don't see the dichotomy of it. it's insane. So they've damaged Picard. It only got 3 seasons, and I can tell why. You can only go so far with the nostalgia of a character before all of the bullshit that you're feeding people just also withers out. It's sad to see what's happened to the show, though. Like when I watched that return for the I haven't watched the new Quantum Leap, by the way. My mom and my brother have watched it, but when I watched that reboot of of Entourage, they brought back all those characters. I wish I hadn't seen the film. I even told my brother, I said, go watch the series, great series. Don't watch the follow up film. Now, I'm a little bit different position here when it comes to Picard because I'm still watching it, but I'm watching it. I'm actually going to comment on it. I think I'm really going to do a breakdown of the series and talk about how shitty it is. But I'm watching it because it really isn't connected to the original TNG. It's inspired by the original TNG, but it's certainly not. It's certainly not the original TNG. The original TNG cast is not in it. There's been so many different. They're totally going away from canon on the series and what was supposed to happen in the original series. I mean, they're just doing it. They are robbing the brand so they can try and make more money and tell their woke stories. And it's a failure. It's a huge failure. For 3 years is not a very long series, and they're only getting 30 episodes of it. So obviously they're not very good at it. It's the same when they tried to rate Batman as though Batman, didn't deserve credit for. My brother was telling me there was an episode of the original Batwoman where she came in and she said, I don't want a man taking credit for what I've done. Well, bitch, you came into his house where he had all these gadgets and he was the one who created that. And you're saying you don't want him taking credit for what you've done? All you did was take his suit. You took his suit, you took all of his utilities. You didn't fucking create that shit. That was him. That was Bruce Wayne and Alfred and Dick and Dick Ward. Not Dick Ward. What was his real name? It was Dick. Was he? Who was it? Was Dick? Oh, Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson and Dick Ward. It was Burt Ward who played Dick Grayson. But they just bastardize the good characters that are what brought people to the franchise, or they bring people out of mothballs who just needed to be left alone. I mean, really, Patrick Stewart. I don't know why he did it, if it was money or whatever else, or if he really believes the philosophies that they're advertising. God bless him, but it's a failure. And he does not look in his best light in this particular thing. His acting is good, but they're destroying you, using you to promote their ideology. And if you share that ideology, I guess that's fine. But a lot of your fans don't. They just don't, and you can't keep pressuring on them before eventually there will be a breaking point, and you won't be respected as much because you did stuff like that. The same thing with let's see what else. The other one that comes to mind is like Full House. Full House was fine the way they left the original series, where it looked like DJ was going to end up with her high school love. Becky and Jesse had their own kid. I think did Danny end up? Danny ends up with Vicky, I think, towards the end of the series. I think that's the way they end up doing it, but I can't remember. It's been a while, but the bottom line is that, or he ended up with someone else. I can't remember. But the series. Oh yeah, the last episode was stupid, which was like Michelle gets amnesia, and they were pitching the Olsen twins and all that. But fortunately, the Olsen twins were smart enough not to come back for the new Full House reboot. I think they knew it was over. They both wanted to go out with their lives and do different things. At least Ashley sounded like she really wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. Now maybe Mary Kate was, but Mary Kate obviously decided she wanted to do other things as well. She's living her life in her own way, and fortunately, they didn't come back. And of course, now that we've lost Bob Saget, he won't be back for any reboots. But fortunately, they finished the show. Even what was her name? Lori Loughlin ended up going to prison for a short time towards the end of the series. But they brought back the series for 4 years, and all they did was show what happens to the girls, and all the girls did was be in these really questionable relationships. And all they did at the end with DJ is she ends up back with Steve again. So why was the point of the series when you've already seen that they end up together? It's like he's like, well, we're going to start with them not being together. She married someone else, had 3 kids with him, and he's dead now in the story, and now he was a firefighter. He got killed in the line of duty, I suppose. And then she ends up moving back into her dad's house with Stephanie and with Kibby, and they're all raising their kids together and all this stuff like that through their rocky relationships. And then finally, she ends up being with Steve again at the end. So what was the point of the series for 4 years other than just saying, "Oh look, we got it, Fuller House." So here's a really funny little thing, by the way, too. Back in the early '90s, when Full House was kind of in its 5th or 6th year, my theater teacher at the time, who was a close friend, she wasn't my theater teacher anymore, but she was my theater teacher in junior high. She helped me, and I wrote a letter to the Jeff Franklin, who was the executive producer of Full House. I sent it off, and the letter suggested that they make the Full House fuller. And the whole idea is that they brought in Kevin came in. He ended up needing a place to stay. Kevin was DJ's original boyfriend, and then I think it was someone else who moved in, and then his younger brother moved in with them, or a cousin or something moved in, and one of them ended up being sight impaired, which was supposed to be because I was trying to promote myself to, as an actor, but I was just introducing the concept of a sight impaired person coming in and bringing more diversity into the show, and that was in the early '90s, probably 90, 91, that I wrote that letter with the help of my theater teacher, Mrs. Farabee, and sent it off to them and never heard anything back from them, which is fine. But I do think it's ironic that years later, when they rebooted the show, it was called Fuller House, when my original suggestion was that they make a Full House fuller. Now, it's not a far stretch to believe that they could have come up with Fuller as a name because it's obvious. It's just ironic. It doesn't mean anything. I just think it's ironic. But I did write a letter and send it off to them, actually introducing that concept. So, trying to get this headset not to shut down. Oh, don't shut down! Don't shut down. These Samsung Pro Buds are shit. If you barely like touch it, just touch it, it'll shut the damn thing off. Anyways, those are some examples of the shows that I feel like they've killed they've bastardized classic television, and they've robbed it of what made it good in the interest of money, and because they're just not original and can't come up with original concept characters anymore, or casting's just not as good as it used to be either. You know, for their part, some of the people that were in all these shows are okay as actors, but a majority of them are very questionable. They're not terribly memorable actors. So I'll give you an example. And I'm not trying to insult her, Jerry Ryan, because I don't really, I don't know her personally. This is purely from a perspective of a viewer. I watched all of Voyager, okay? All the TV show Voyager. I listened to it, listened to every episode, watched some of them, physically watched some of them. 7 of 9 was in Voyager, okay? Jerry Ryan, who played 7 of 9. She's also in Picard, okay? But I remember like 3 or 4 characters from Voyager, and she's not one of them. To the point when she came back on, she was on Picard. I was saying to my brother, I was like, "Yeah, well, I never really got into to Deep Space Nine, so I don't really know 7 of 9." He was like, "7 of 9 was on Voyager." I was like, "She was?" I was like, "Oh shit, she didn't stand out at all," and she doesn't stand out in this at all. I think it has more to do with the character's not that interesting to me. I don't think there's enough depth behind the character, and I don't think that's a Jerry Ryan mistake. I think it's a bad directing mistake, a bad creation of the character. Voyager was not created by Gene Roddenberry, just so you know. Gene Roddenberry did not create. He created TNG, and he died after TNG. He wasn't involved in Voyager and all that stuff like that. It was inspired by Gene Roddenberry. Picard was not created by Gene Roddenberry either. It was based on characters, inspired by characters in the original TNG, but it is not Gene Roddenberry's creation. Gene Roddenberry was a little deluded in himself, but he did not create these characters, nor did he get it. And he was more involved in the casting in those other shows, and I think that shows in the casting and in the performances. The people doing this are obviously very woke, and they're obviously they're not very good with overall creation. Like right now, I'd give the show probably like a 6. I think season 2 is a little bit better than season 1, but not by much. Not by much. It's the nostalgia characters they're bringing back that are really the things that make you go, oh, okay, interesting. They brought back John Delancey, the guy who played Q, who's one of the great actors. If you've ever don't know John Delancey, uh, watch his work. He's fantastic. Patrick Stewart's a great actor too, by the way. I mean, honestly, all of the characters, they're all the actors. Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes, who's a great director as well, by the way. Jonathan Frakes is a great director. All of them are great. Okay, they're great actors, but they're surrounded by inferior or less trained talent because talent now is not trained for acting anymore. These folks aren't taking acting classes, or at least not taking good acting classes, I'll put it that way. They're taking mediocre acting classes that do not stretch their skill set as performers. It doesn't get them to really connect with the characters and bring them to life and all that. And part of it's the director's failure. Part of it's the actor's failure for taking on a role that maybe they weren't ready for at that time. And then part of it is the failure of the overall story because they don't know what they're doing with the story and they're trying to come up with shit as they go along. In Picard, the one thing I will say I like about Picard is that each season kind of focuses on something. So in the last season was about dealing with the issue of even though I think it was kind of silly the way they suddenly made Starfleet and the Federation go, suddenly become a bunch of assholes after all the years they had taken care of and promoted unity and freedom and the synthetics and all that, the androids, and then suddenly just because of something going on with the Romulans, they decided to turn against them. It was kind of a bullshit, it's kind of a bullshit concept, and they kind of ruined the history of the Federation. And then in this next season, of course, they had to make it called the Confederation, suggesting racism and all that woke bullshit. I mean, this is the problem. They're just so caught up in their ideology that they cannot see they're damaging brands, and they don't care. As long as they get their money, they don't give a shit. They don't care about the nostalgia and what made these things great. They care about, you got to see what I think, because what I think is more important than what you think, and you're a racist. You're mean, you're bad. And I'm pure of thought. But you don't seem to realize that your show exists in a dichotomy. You're completely condescending. Your whole concept is hypocritical. But you don't see it. You just don't see it. But it's fun. It's dumbass shit. And once I'm watching it for free, and once my 7 days is over, I don't need it. Thank you very much. All right, well, listen, I guess that's it for now. I hope you have a great, if you want to watch these classic TV shows, go watch the original Quantum Leap. Don't watch the new one. Go watch the original Dukes of Hazzard. Don't watch the new Dukes of Hazzard bullshit they've got out there. Even the Dukes of Hazzard reunion films that they did with the original cast, don't watch those. Just watch the original series. Go watch the original Full House. It was great. It ran for 8 years. The last season was kind of nonsense. They stretched it too far. But, they had some good things even leading up into the 8th season. Entourage, definitely go watch the first 7 seasons, 8 seasons of it. Do not watch the 2015 film. Other great shows that did not get bastardized anymore. Go watch Frasier. Go watch Friends. It's one of the best shows of all time. Go watch the original TNG. Just some of the best Star Trek stuff ever in TNG. The cast is remarkable. All right, God bless. Take care of yourself. And I'm caught up. See you later today. Be safe and give people a hug. Be happy. Look for the good things in life. Bye.